God does not measure what can be seen, but that which is unseen within the heart. Therefore, we are told to wait until the Lord comes. He will bring to light the hidden things of darkness and reveal the motives of the hearts. 1 Corinthians chapter 4, verse 5. In the book of Romans, we are reminded that God will judge the secrets of human hearts. Romans chapter 2, verse 16. Now, while we're on the subject, I want to mention that although there are physical and mental manifestations from sin, sin is a spiritual affliction, and therefore sin requires a spiritual remedy. Now, in the parable of Lazarus and the rich man, as we discussed in the prior section, Jesus was warning the Pharisees, listen, guys, you missed the mark. You've gone astray, and if you don't want to suffer in hell, experience separation from God, you need to be holy, for God is holy. In fact, God himself said, you must be holy because I, the Lord your God, am holy. Leviticus chapter 19, verse 2. You see, like freedom, holiness does not come without cost. One must separate from sin and abide in Christ. And the last point I want to make on this issue is this. You need to notice something else, something very important about the rich man and Lazarus parable. Did you notice the fact that both men were conscious of their surroundings and experienced their surroundings as if they were still in the flesh? This reveals much about the experience and reality of hell, and I want you to pay close attention to this. Both men were able to see, hear, touch, and speak as if they still had bodies, and yet we know that they were dead. They were in spirit form. And I believe this reveals to us that in spirit form, we are able to see, hear, speak, touch, taste, smell, think. Now, how this is possible, I cannot explain it. But we know this is true because Jesus told us the rich man could see, and he cried out to Abraham, begging for a drop of water to quench his unquenchable thirst. The hell Jesus depicted in this parable is designed to address the Pharisees' lack of acceptance of the truth. And at the same time, it gives us a picture of the suffering and punishment earned for the rejection or objection of God's will, God's purpose, God's intent for mankind and each and every individual on earth. So the question is, what is God's will for us? Well, first and foremost, the first of the 10 commandments is that we are to love God. In the book of Deuteronomy, it is written, love the Lord your God with all of your heart, with all of your soul, and with all of your strength. Deuteronomy chapter 6, verse 5. In the book of Matthew, Jesus defines the greatest commandment of all. Provoked by one of the Pharisees seeking to test Jesus and challenge Jesus' understanding of God's law, the Pharisee asked this question, Teacher, which commandment in the law is the greatest? Now listen to Jesus' answer. He begins his response by quoting Deuteronomy chapter 6, verse 5. Jesus said to him, love the Lord your God with all of your heart, with all of your soul, and with all of your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment. The second is like it. Love your neighbor as yourself. And the law and the prophets depend on these two. All of the law and the prophets depend on these two. That's in Matthew chapter 22, verses 34 through 40. What is God's will for us? God's will is to love. John 15, verse 17. Did you notice? Did you notice how Jesus depicted Abraham holding Lazarus in a loving embrace? It brings to mind a child being coddled in a parent's loving hug. It's a beautiful picture. And notice something else. Jesus told us exactly what hell is. And if you missed it, I'm going to point it out here. In this parable, Jesus depicted a chasm between them, preventing anyone from traveling from heaven to hell and vice versa. we are not told exactly how this impenetrable barrier works. It's not distance or height, but we do know that a separation exists between heaven and hell. I could sum up this message in one sentence. Hell is the complete separation of one's soul from God's presence for all eternity. Now let me speak to those of you out there that are saying to yourself, so what if I'm separated from God? There is no God. There is no heaven, and therefore there is no hell. Okay, you say there is no God. Let me ask you this. Does energy exist? Yes, it does. Is energy constant? Yes, it is. So if energy is constant, and we are a form of energy, therefore aren't we constant? So what happens to your soul after you die? Well, we already discussed this issue in the beginning of this series, and I want you to think about this. The first death is the death of our flesh. The second death is the death of our soul, our energy. So if energy is constant and cannot be destroyed, where does it go if it doesn't return to God? Where does your soul go after your body dies? You see, if there is no God, then our soul will go on to exist on this earth for all eternity. It brings to mind the movie The Sixth Sense, starring Bruce Willis. You must admit that wandering the earth as a lost soul in spirit form, separated from God, isn't where you want to be. That's separation from God. That's hell. But it doesn't have to be that way. You have a choice. God is not willing that anyone be lost or separated from his presence.